The hypocrites are on the march on the Potomac and indeed throughout the United States of America. Millions of people, pussy-hatted or not, are on the march against the Supreme Court of the United States, which has ruled not that abortion is illegal, but that it is not a constitutional right, and that for decades the United States, on the, they say, false, failed premise of Roe versus Wade, has been pretending it was a constitutional right when it was not. And it now goes back to the states and the people as to whether abortion should be permitted and what the laws should be that cover the issue throughout the United States of America. Just to put my own cards on the table, I myself do not believe in abortion, but I'm not trying to change the law for anyone else, and certainly not in the United States. This is the very epitome of a domestic matter. This is the United States' own internal affair. But I am entitled to point out hypocrisy when I see it. Because amongst the pussy-hatted liberals and Democrats that are marching for the right to choose are, first of all, an overwhelming number who denied that right to choose to millions of Americans when it came to the forcible vaccination against the coronavirus. Millions of these pussy-hatters were amongst those who said, like Justin Trudeau, that if you don't get vaxxed, you won't be able to go out for a cup of coffee. You will not be able to go out for a meal. You'll not be able to travel anywhere or visit anything or go to any event. And if you're a trucker in Canada, you will not be able to cross state lines if you cannot prove that you have been vaccinated. So bodily autonomy, now claimed by these pussy-hatters, was not something they granted to those who, informed, refused their consent to the idea of forcible vaccination of an untried vaccine. Secondly, millions of these pussy-hatters have been telling us these last years that a woman was not something that could be defined, that a woman could actually be a man identifying as a woman. But suddenly the air is thick with women's rights, the very rights that they took away from women to their own spaces, their own changing rooms, their own sports, and their own status as women. The word woman had disappeared from public discourse and from the names of wards and sections of hospitals throughout the Western world. We were no longer breastfeeding, but chest feeding. You were no longer a mother, but a birthing parent. But when it comes to Roe versus Wade, millions of them are out there shouting about women's rights. Thirdly, millions of these pussy-hatters think nothing of voting for scores of billions of dollars of their own country's money to be spent on weapons of war and death that massacre other people's children in other countries, including Afghanistan and, of course, of late, including in the Ukraine, in the NATO war against Russia on the territory of Ukraine. These hypocrites care nothing for children or women in the countries overseas that they bomb, invade, and occupy. Indeed, they are gung-ho, straining at the leash to kill women in other people's countries in the name of the United States empire. Fourthly, as I said, it does not mean that abortion is abolished, but it does mean that abortion is now a matter for individual states in the United States of America. I have no view about that. I merely opine that you cannot abolish abortion. Abortion will happen whether it's legal or it's illegal. The question is safe abortion. The question is, abortion when? I myself have always in Parliament sought to bring the upper limit down. 12 weeks would be the maximum that I would support in legislation, but that's nothing to do with Roe versus Wade, nothing to do with anybody else, nothing to do with the United States of America. This is a matter for them, but it has lit a torch, and that torch the Democrats are already brandishing, at least on the internet. But here's the rub. If the Democrats had wanted to enshrine the right to safe abortion throughout the United States of America, they have had decades in which to do it. They had the political power with which to do it. They are in control of the White House, in control of the Senate, in control of the House of Representatives. They could have legislated any time to enshrine that right to free abortion, safe abortion, the same kind of rules for abortion in all 50 of the states of the Union, but they did not do it. Why? Because they are hypocrites. President Joe Biden is forever brandishing not torches, but candles on his knees in Catholic churches, forever reminding the electorate that he is a Catholic of Irish extraction, after all. But unless things have changed, the Roman Catholic Church is completely opposed to abortion. And guess what? So was Joe Biden. In the 1970s, at the time of Roe versus Wade, Biden opposed that ruling and has done nothing either to change his religion or tell his co-religionists that he no longer believes in a fundamental precept of the faith. He has not lifted a finger to ensure that the law was enshrined in the United States. And then there's Nancy Pelosi, another one never done genuflecting on her knees. I don't mean her drinking habits. I mean on a Sunday, where she's never done telling people for electoral reasons how Catholic she is. Just a few weeks ago, she was out campaigning, moving heaven and earth in support of a Democratic candidate who is campaigning for no abortions at all. These people make me sick with their hypocrisy. Now, of course, hypocrisy is not confined to the Democratic Party and not to the United States of America. Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, and his amanuensis, though his amanuensis is supposed to be shorter than him, and, well, David Lammy is vastly, vastly bigger than him. In fact, he gets bigger every day. He's looking like Idi Amin Dada, the former dictator of Uganda, the more I look at him. Both of them are out today saying they could not possibly countenance Labour members of Parliament standing on picket lines, even though pictures quickly emerged of both of them standing on picket lines. But those workers were white-faced, white-collared members of the University and College Lecturers Union, not horny-handed, blue-collar railway workers outside railway stations. Picket lines in cloisters of the best universities are one thing, but picket lines outside Britain's railheads are clearly beyond the pale. Both of these purport to be leading figures in something that still calls itself the Labour Party, the party of workers. But they have set their face against a group of workers who have taken the country by storm, not by force, but by force of argument. Britain's railway workers are engaged in the most popular strike ever known in this country of Britain. That's the most popular strike ever. 75% of the British people polled this week support their demand for an inflation level of wage increase. 60% support the strike itself. And overwhelmingly, people blame the government and the fat cats that run the railway companies for the fact that we have a dispute in the first place. Why is that? Well, because the British people are fair-minded on the whole. They know a good and honest and just cause when they see one. And they see that cutting people's wages, because that's what a sub-inflation level wage increase means. Cutting the wages of people that worked throughout the COVID catastrophe, many dying, but who worked throughout so that the rest of us could continue to work and to move. That offering them a 7% wage cut of a 3% wage offer when inflation is now virtually 10%, the highest for 40 years. The railway workers don't deserve a 7% pay cut. As a matter of fact, nobody deserves a pay cut when profits are bumper, when the billionaires are multiplying in front of our eyes and billionaires are becoming trillionaires. Why should the workers, who had nothing to do with declaring war on Russia, with the policy of lockdown that the people who own and run our country implemented, why should the workers pay for it? But there's another reason. The railway strikes are the most popular strikes ever because the leader of the Railway Workers Union, Mick Lynch, is manifestly written on every line in his face, detectable in every nuance in his voice, an honest and authentic leader of working men and women, with no side, not there to advance his own career, not there to attain office, there to serve the people who employ him, to stand up for them, and to make their case as powerfully and as clearly as it's possible to make it. And my goodness, Mick Lynch has done that in spades. In the tradition of other great railway workers' union leaders, like Jimmy Knapp, the late and great Scottish railwaymen's leader, who also led national rail strikes that were actually popular amongst the people who could see and hear the sincerity of his case in his grizzled face and his gnarled voice. Or Big Bob Crow, God rest his soul, gone too soon, who was the great railway leader, who famously said, when they were discussing the euro, whether Britain should join the euro, I don't care what's on the money. I don't care if it's the Queen's face or the Queen's arse. All I care about is how much of that money is going into the wage packets of the men and women that run the railways here in Britain. Mick Lynch is in that tradition. No nonsense, no flannel, no spin, just truth, just facts that he drives home in every television interview that he is given. It's said that the television interviewers are threatening to go on strike unless they are protected from having to interview Mick Lynch. It is said that Tory government ministers are begging Central Office not to put them up on the studios against Mick Lynch. Turning, as I must, because I have spoken too long, to Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson faced two catastrophic by-election defeats. one to Labour, one to the Liberal Democrats on Thursday, and it has created an earthquake inside the ranks of the Conservative Party. He didn't feel it yet because he took particular care to be out of the country when the results were announced. Where else would he be but out of the country? Whenever there's any trouble, he's in Kiev, giving away even more billions of British taxpayers' pounds that are desperately needed at home that could solve the railway dispute like that. He'd rather give the money to the clown, Zelensky, in his disastrously losing war against Russia in the Ukraine. Boris Johnson, he'll go anywhere, even Rwanda, even Kigali, rather than face the music back home in Westminster, in London, because that music is increasingly a crescendo of calls for him to go. Now the familiar problems endure. Nobody wants Boris Johnson's Conservatives, but they don't fancy Rishi Sunak's Conservatives either. Still less do they fancy Keir Starmer's Labour, who won a by-election on Thursday with the lowest Labour vote in the constituency since 1931, when Labour was wiped out after its leader, the apostate and traitor Ramsay MacDonald, deserted his party and went into a coalition with the Conservatives. It is said that 6 Conservative members of Parliament are about to travel in the opposite direction, where they will be warmly embraced on the Labour benches, where Jeremy Corbyn is not. Corbyn opened up this week about the role played by the intelligence services, the security services, and the British military in his downfall. And we'll be talking to the hottest journalistic property on this side of the Atlantic, Kit Clarenberg, about that during the first hour of this show.